Here's a number that should terrify anyone holding tech stocks. 87%. That's how much of the world's rare earth processing China controls right now. Not mining processing. The step that turns rocks into the magnets inside your Tesla, the chips in your iPhone, and the missiles in a Patriot defense system. And there's an island with enough rare earths to break that monopoly completely. The problem? It's covered in ice claimed by Denmark, and both superpowers are already fighting over it in ways the media isn't covering. Let me show you the $3 trillion resource war happening in slow motion. When Trump said he wanted to buy Greenland in 2019, the entire internet turned it into a meme. Late-night hosts made jokes. Foreign policy experts called it absurd. Denmark's Prime Minister said the idea was ridiculous. But here's what nobody mentioned. Within 18 months of that statement, China made a $9.3 billion bid for mining rights in Greenland's southern territory. The US immediately sent diplomats to block it. And Greenland population, 57,000, suddenly had a State Department office, a new consulate, and a US aid package worth $12.1 million. All for an island most Americans couldn't find on a map. So let's get one thing straight. This was never about buying Greenland. It was about making sure China doesn't get there first. Greenland sits on one of the largest untapped mineral reserves on the planet. We're talking about 25 million tons of rare earth elements. That's enough to supply global demand for electric vehicles for the next 38 years at current consumption rates. But consumption rates aren't staying current. EV production is expected to grow 400% by 2030. Wind turbines need rare earths. Every F-35 fighter jet needs 417 kilograms of rare earth magnets. And right now, every single one of those supply chains runs through China. Here's why that's a problem. In 2010, during a territorial dispute with Japan, China cut off rare earth exports for 2 months. Prices spiked 600%. Toyota, Hitachi, and Siemens had to halt production lines. It wasn't a trade war. It wasn't sanctioned. It was a quiet demonstration of leverage. And since then, China hasn't reduced its control, it's expanded it. They don't just mine rare earths anymore. They've bought processing facilities in Malaysia, Australia, and Africa. They've cornered the refining stage, the part where raw ore becomes usable material. So even if you mine rare earths in California or Australia, you're probably shipping them to China to be processed. Which means Beijing has a kill switch on the entire advanced manufacturing sector, unless someone finds a new supply. Now here's where it gets interesting. Greenland isn't just valuable because of what's underneath it. It's valuable because of where it is. Look at a map, not the flat Mercator projection you're used to, but an Arctic-centered view. Greenland sits between North America and Europe, directly on the shortest route between the US East Coast and Northern Europe. It's also one of the closest points between NATO territory and Russia. During the Cold War, the US built Thule Air Base in northern Greenland. It's still there. It's still operational. And it's one of the most critical early warning radar installations in the American missile defense system. If that base goes offline, the warning time for an ICBM launched from Russia drops from 23 minutes to under 7. 7 minutes to detect, verify, and respond to a nuclear launch. That's not a military base. That's a civilizational insurance policy. And here's the uncomfortable part. Greenland is a semi-autonomous territory of Denmark, but it's pushing for full independence, which means that in the next 10 to 20 years, Greenland could be a sovereign nation. And sovereign nations get to choose their own allies. So, let's talk about what China's been doing while everyone was laughing at Trump. In 2016, a Chinese state-owned company tried to buy an abandoned naval base in Greenland for $150 million. The US pressured Denmark to block it. In 2018, China offered to finance 3 new airports in Greenland. Total cost, 550 million euros. The US offered to finance them instead. Denmark stepped in and took over the project to keep both superpowers out. In 2019, China launched its first Polar Silk Road white paper, a strategic plan to integrate Arctic shipping routes and resource extraction into the Belt and Road Initiative. They've built 4 icebreakers. They're planning 3 more. The US has 2 icebreakers. One of them is 46 years old. And in 2021, a Chinese state-backed mining company applied for licenses to explore rare earth deposits in southern Greenland. Greenland's government approved it. The US State Department immediately sent envoys to nuke Greenland's capital, and within 6 months, the project was delayed indefinitely. That's not diplomacy. That's a veto. And it happened without a single headline. Now let's connect this to markets. Because if you own tech stocks, EV manufacturers, or defense contractors, this isn't just a geopolitics story. It's a repricing event waiting to happen. Here's the scenario. If Greenland's rare earth projects come online, Chinese rare earth exporters lose pricing power. That's bearish for Chinese rare earth miners, but it's massively bullish for any company that relies on rare earth inputs and is currently getting squeezed on margins. Tesla, for example, uses about 9 kilograms of rare earths per vehicle. If rare earth prices drop 30 to 40% because of new Arctic supply, Tesla's per unit margin improves by roughly $800 to $1,000 per car. Multiply that across 2 million vehicles, and you're looking at $1.6 to $2 billion in additional gross profit just from input cost relief. Now flip it. If China locks in access to Greenland's resources through debt financing, joint ventures, or political alignment after independence, which is exactly what they've done in Africa, Latin America, and Central Asia, then they don't lose their monopoly. They expand it. And in that scenario, every Western manufacturer becomes more vulnerable, not less. So this isn't a binary Greenland opens, China loses trade. It's a geopolitical option structure, and right now, the market is pricing it at zero. Here's the twist most people miss. Greenland wants independence, but independence costs money. Right now, Denmark provides 60% of Greenland's government budget, about $570 million a year. If Greenland goes independent, that money disappears. So they need revenue. Rare earth mining could provide it. But developing a mine in the Arctic costs billions, takes a decade, and requires expertise Greenland doesn't have domestically, which means they need a partner. The US can offer security, trade access, and diplomatic support. China can offer cash, infrastructure, and no environmental questions. Guess which one is more attractive to a developing economy with 57,000 people and a GDP of $3 billion? This is the same playbook China used in Zambia, Ecuador, and Sri Lanka. Offer infrastructure loans, take equity in resource projects, and when the loans can't be repaid, convert debt into long-term control of strategic assets. It's not colonialism. It's patient capital with leverage. And if it works in Greenland, China gets rare earths, a port on NATO's doorstep, and a wedge into Arctic shipping routes. The US loses all three. Now, add in climate change. Greenland's ice sheet is melting faster than any IPCC model predicted a decade ago. In 2019, Greenland lost 532 billion tons of ice. That's double the annual average from the 1,990 seconds. And as the ice melts, two things happen. 1. Minerals become easier to access. 2. Shipping routes open up. The Northern Sea Route, which runs along Russia's Arctic coast, is now navigable without icebreakers for 4 months a year. By 2040, it could be open for 8. That route cuts shipping time from Shanghai to Rotterdam by 14 days compared to the Suez Canal. 14 days is hundreds of thousands of dollars in fuel costs per container ship. Which means Arctic routes aren't a novelty, they're about to become the default. And Greenland sits at the center of them. China knows this, Russia knows this, the US knows this. And every year, the ice melts a little faster, and the scramble gets a little more urgent. So if you're asking, how do I actually trade this? Here's the framework. There are 3 sectors directly exposed to Greenland's rare earth development. 1. Rare earth miners and processors. If Greenland comes online, Chinese rare earth companies face margin compression. If China locks in Greenland access, they extend their dominance. Watch companies like China Northern Rare Earth Group and compare their valuations to Western rare earth plays like MP Materials or Lynas Rare Earths. The spread tells you what the market thinks about future supply. 2. EV and renewable energy manufacturers. Tesla, BYD, Rivian, Vestas, anyone who depends on neodymium, dysprosium, or praseodymium. If rare earth prices fall, their margins expand. If prices spike due to supply shocks or Chinese export restrictions, they get squeezed. Greenland isn't priced into any of these stocks yet. 3. Defense and infrastructure. Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and Northrop Grumman all rely on rare earth magnets for missiles, radar, and jet engines. If the US loses rare earth access, Pentagon procurement costs explode. If the US secures Greenland, defense budgets stabilize and potentially shift toward Arctic infrastructure. There's also a secondary play: Nordic construction and shipping companies. If Greenland develops, they're the ones building roads, ports, and processing facilities. Royal Greenland AS is already one of the largest employers on the island. Think of it like the picks and shovels trade during a gold rush. You don't have to bet on who wins the resource war, you bet on the infrastructure required to fight it. But here's the risk the spreadsheets don't capture. Mining in Greenland isn't just technically difficult, it's politically explosive. The Kvanefjeld project in southern Greenland, one of the largest rare earth deposits outside China, was approved in 2020. In 2021, Greenland held an election. The pro-mining party lost. The new government immediately revoked the mining license, citing environmental concerns and potential uranium contamination. Uranium is a byproduct of rare earth extraction. It's unavoidable in certain deposits, and Greenland has a zero-tolerance uranium policy. So the largest shovel-ready rare earth project in the territory is now dead. Not because of US-China competition. Not because of financing. Because 57,000 people voted, and they didn't want the mine. That's the part no geopolitical model accounts for: local agency. Greenland isn't a chessboard. It's a country with voters, environmental movements, and political parties that don't care about Pentagon supply chains or Chinese Belt and Road projections. If the population decides that clean ice and fishing rights matter more than rare earth royalties, the entire thesis collapses. And there's no hedge for that. So why does this matter right now? Because we're about to hit an inflection point. Greenland is planning another independence referendum, likely within the next 3 to 5 years. If they vote yes, the subsidy from Denmark disappears, and they'll need new revenue within 18 months or face a fiscal crisis. That's the window where China can move. Not with a naval base, not with a public buyout, with a debt for equity swap on infrastructure projects, a joint venture on rare earth processing, and a diplomatic recognition package that makes the US look flat-footed. And if that happens, the entire rare earth market reprices. Chinese rare earth stocks rally because their monopoly extends. Western EV and defense stocks sell off because supply chain risk increases. And pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and ETF managers start waking up to the fact that they've been underpricing geopolitical risk in their commodity exposure. That's not a decade away. That's a 36-month scenario. And the market is currently pricing it at zero. Now here's the part that doesn't fit into a valuation model. Greenland has been a colonial possession for 300 years. First under Denmark, then under Nazi occupation during World War II, then back to Denmark. The Inuit population, the indigenous people of Greenland, were forcibly relocated in the 1950 seconds to make room for Thule Air Base. They were moved from their hunting grounds to prefabricated towns. Their tuberculosis rates quadrupled. Suicide rates skyrocketed. Entire communities disintegrated. And now, 70 years later, the same governments that displaced them are back, offering to develop their land. This time, it's not for a radar station. It's for rare earths. But the logic is identical. Your sovereignty matters less than our supply chains. If you're building an investment thesis around Greenland, you need to understand that history, because the people who live there remember it. And they're not interested in becoming a resource colony again, whether the buyer speaks English or Mandarin. So here's the bottom line. Greenland is sitting on $2 to $3 trillion in rare earth elements at a time when the world is electrifying everything, and China controls 87% of the processing capacity. The US wants to secure it. China wants to own it. Greenland wants independence, which means they need money, which means they're open to deals. And the ice is melting faster than anyone predicted, which means the timeline is compressing. If Greenland's rare earths come online under Western partnerships, Chinese rare earth pricing power collapses, and every EV, wind turbine, and defense contractor sees input costs drop by 30 to 40%. If China locks in access through debt, joint ventures, or post-independence alignment, they don't just maintain their monopoly, they extend it into the Arctic, securing both the resources and the shipping routes for the next 50 years. Right now, the market is pricing Greenland's rare earths at zero. No major commodity index includes them. No equity analyst is modeling supply impacts. No geopolitical risk premium is being applied to Chinese rare earth exporters. which means this is either the largest mispricing in the commodity space, or I'm wrong about the timeline. But if I'm right, this repeats in the next 24 to 36 months. And by the time it shows up in a Bloomberg headline, the trade is over. Now, Greenland is just one piece of a larger shift. Because while everyone's focused on rare earths, there's a second Arctic resource play happening that almost no one is covering. Subsea cable infrastructure. 99% of global internet traffic runs through underwater cables. And the fastest routes between North America, Europe, and Asia all run through the Arctic. China is already laying them. Russia is already tapping them. And the US is about to spend $40 billion on a program most people have never heard of. I'll break that down in the next video. But if this one made you realize you're underexposed to geopolitical commodity risk, hit the link below. I've built a 3-part series on how pension funds, sovereign wealth managers, and hedge funds are repositioning for Arctic resource competition. It's not public, it's not in ETFs, and it's happening right now. See you in the next one.